find that Goans are finding their own voice. Because as the saying goes, if you don't tell your stories, the world will not know them, and nobody else can tell your stories the way they have been lived. So this is a message after Dotor's book, Radharao Gracias' book, that every Goan has a lived-in story within himself. And those who have not written those stories, you have to come out with those stories, because they are the most fascinating stories to be told. I have lived on both sides of the print world, self-publishing and publishing with publishing houses. And publishing houses, they may not know your Goa stories, but they are always looking for a narrative which has a beginning, a story, and an end. And they are looking for a plot. And outside of that, even if it doesn't fit into the Goa paradigm of things, they will say, no, this story won't sell. But this kind of publishing by a local publisher, and to tell these very Goan stories is fantastic. I mean, the story would have great appeal for young men, young boys who are growing to be men, because they are stories which contain rites of passage, how boys become young men, you know, of the older generation, and they are very fascinating. Believe me, I've been a theatre goer in my childhood, and every story, the way it unfolded, it was like a parda of a theatre, you know, one scene and then the next story unfolded. I could even hear that music, which was part of the Khel theatre when I was growing up. Then the music would start, and then the next story would connect. And it was so fascinating, it was joyous, because suddenly I felt this is something that is a lived-in experience. You know, it also combines lots of local imagery into the writing of the book. So you feel that this is our book. It's a story that is being told. In fact, when I published my first book, Tales from the Attic, and I self-sold it on the streets and the trains and everywhere, people would come back to me and say, how did you know this happened in North Goa? This incident is from our village. So it also goes to tell you that, you know, many of the experiences of life in Goa's villages are similar. And that is the beauty of this book, because it's a rural story well told. We are always reading urban stories, you know, of plots, of murders and other things. This book is a picaresque novel. It contains all that. But at the same time, it is very localized. I remember when I was growing up, my father ran a bus service from Kavilosni to Vasco, and it was called Anthony Bus Service. And every April and May, he brought home lovely gifts when he came back. My father was the driver. He also had a driver called Shivaji, but my father drove the bus. And he came back in April and May with gifts for us. Huge Majorda watermelons. So there are so many things about Goa that we know and we have forgotten, because we have been subsumed by this modernity, modern food, modern likes, modern dislikes. We have left behind a whole rich culture that was a way of life for the older generation. Okay. So what's fascinating about the book is the stories of Alberto and Ishmael. I will not go into that later, because there is a huge plot there, and I want you to read the book and connect with that lovely plot.
Well, most of us know that it's a long way to Tipperary. And those who did know would have heard the song. It was playing just 1 or 2 seconds or minutes before we all got into the days. But Radharao has found a shortcut to Tipperary. But in doing so, he has taken the long way into fiction. Let me explain why I say this long way into fiction. He has kind of merged more than one genre into this novel. It starts like kind of a little surreal kind of a feeling when you, there's some magic happening in the beginning. It gives you that little surreal, you may even think that if you're reading one of these novels from these Latin American authors, and if you look at the name on the cover, Gracias, I think you would be excused for believing that this is not an Indian writing. But then that scene happens in Mumbai. Oh, Bombay, sorry. It was not Mumbai then, Bombay. It happens in Bombay. And there we see the underbelly of crime. And in this case, the underbelly of the begging trade. But with that unreality that he starts off with, moves into a very realistic world. Not just in Mumbai, not just in Bombay. Well, we're so used to saying Mumbai that we've forgotten Bombay. Not just in Bombay, but the story starts in Bombay, where the two protagonists meet. I'm not going to reveal the story to you all. Like Savya said, we want you to read the book. That magic brings them together. One of them goes in search of the other after some time. Through various coincidences, they connect. And then they shift to Goa. Now, they don't just reach Goa. There are a lot of adventures on the way. And then, in Goa, they come to Majorda. Now, Majorda is not just they've come to Majorda because Radharao lives there and he's lived there all his life. But there is a connection to why they decide to stop in Majorda, which at that moment we as readers don't know. So then after that, the bulk of the book happens here in Goa, in Majorda, Utorda. In fact, Savya was just talking about the watermelons. If you want to know why Majorda watermelons are the best, you read the book. Maybe you will eat those watermelons or not after that, I don't know. But I'll tell you, I read the book last year because I was editing it, and this season's watermelons, I had my share of them. So I would really like to go. But why I'm bringing up these watermelons is that Radharao has used a lot of instances of his life, I would think, in creating the novel. Many of us who will be reading this book will start connecting some of these incidents to something that you have read in the newspapers, to something you have known about, or something somebody has told you about. And that is where it all starts coming true, and that is how Radharao has been able to bring together so many instances, get two people from Bombay, bring them to Goa, and create a whole novel out of it. So we start with something surrealism, get into a realism. And now I'm rambling about Bombay and Majorda. When the book says shortcut to Tipperary, there is a happy ending. And like most of our TRs, they always have a happy ending. Radharao's book also has a happy ending. A lot of things that happen are brought together various times in the book through a lot of coincidences. I think it may be a bit too many coincidences in this book, but it's a first novel, so I think we can excuse Radharao, next time he can change it. But I, as an editor, decided not to touch on any of those coincidences, because if I did that, then I would be taking away from Radharao's work, and that I did not want to do. And so we have this book that ends in Tipperary, a very happy ending. And I have only one request to everybody: as you read the book, don't take any shortcuts and turn pages. Read every word, every sentence. Thank you, everybody, and congratulations, Radharao. All the best for the future. I hope there is another book already on the way.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and the release of Goan, a shortcut to Tipperary.
Today for Goans is an auspicious day, not because we are having and following and releasing the book of Radharao, Gracias. It's also an auspicious day because our Archbishop Patriarch His Excellency Philip Neri Ferrand will be elevated today as a Cardinal by Pope Francis. on this day, a very auspicious day, a proud moment for all Goans, our colours will be up. The Radharao Gracias is releasing his book. It will be remembered for a long, long time. I got this book in my hand from 10 days before. We request to read this book. And there's a reference to my school, where I spent around 28 years, long years. When I read this book, it took me just 2 sessions. Started at about 9 o'clock night till 12:30, half the book was over. It is keeping you glued down. It is written in such a way you don't feel like sleeping, you don't feel like closing the book. You will know this experience when you start reading it. And next day I finished the book. It has 34 chapters, almost 246 pages. It has touched the village life where I and you, of my age people, who lived in 1960s and 70s. Today's life is totally changed from that life, but still in villages we find a glimpse of that life. He described the railway station. Those times the railway stations, Goans were there, as station masters. Today we don't find them. There's one Cardos, there was one called Dora, there was one called someone called Tulsidas Naik. So many were there. Natkani was there. So many people were there. All Goans. And we could find that this station belongs to us, belongs to Goans. Our own people are there to handle us and give us all experience and the tickets and everything. Today we are missing that. Totally missed. But that time it was totally different, not only because of watermelons, but life in a village, Radharao rightly says in his book, nobody remains hungry in villages. Nothing is there, just go out. Climb a tree, coconut tree, you get tender coconuts. Just see Bhatkar is not there. How you will get if you get caught? And it's sufficient for you. It gives me all the tricks the village people are using in catching birds, wild boars. I'm not telling you these tricks. We are not supposed to kill them. But the tricks village people had without, wild boars, they used to catch without firing a gun. How? You read that book. I'm not going to spell it out. These are the tricks which are there in the villages. You'll find only the village people. And it takes you on a journey. At the village, there's a Bhatkar. But the book Bhatkar is a good Bhatkar, not an ugly Bhatkar. It takes care of his neighbors, takes care of the village people. It's like a court. It is true. I have seen that in my life. You go to the court, the Bhatkar court, gives patience hearing and gives you a judgment. Either you follow, don't follow, but 95, 98%, 99% should follow that Bhatkar. Then there are Padrigar. Padrigar is a religious head, well respected. His preachings are being obeyed even today with respect. That scenario in this book is very, very pleasing, and I hope the city people should read this book. It touches the heart. When I read the book and know about its author, I always think of Dahi Handi. You know, on Krishna Janmashtami, we always play the Dahi Handi. There's a group of people come together, they make a strong base. Then they slowly come rising up. And after the whole group, only one fellow goes on the top. In the village, we find whole base is in the village. And as you go on the top, there's a risk. You take a risk. You may fall down. People may not like you. But taking all the risks, you go up and reach the top. Radharao's story is like this, Dayahandi. He has come from the base, very strong base with strong followers created by him with the backing of his family. Taking all the risk, he rose up. And today he's on the top. And one who goes on the top has a right to eat that butter. And he is reaping all his some labor, his efforts. And today is the day to eat his butter, and this butter is spreading amongst you. We should take a share of this butter. Swami Vivekananda once had to give a lecture in America, USA. It's a spiritual lecture. When he was about to come, there was a sentence written on the board. God is nowhere. And he has been invited to give a lecture on spiritual. When he came up on the stage, he saw the word God is nowhere, defeats the very purpose of the lecture. See his presence of mind. He goes to the board, takes a small chalk, and just see N-O-W, put a stroke, and ask the people to read it. Same people who were 1 minute before reading God is nowhere, now they were reading it, God is now here. N-O-W, stroke, H-E-R-E. Now, Radharao is here today after his tremendous efforts as a writer. This is not an easy work. It's not one person's work. I should always, I said, when successful man, there is one woman, his wife, Nimi, always smiling, never takes any tension on the head. And she bears all the food. Radharao has no mobile phone. You don't use it. And I will advise you to follow him. It's a Nimi who takes all the foods. And she answers everybody. She pleases everybody. No, he is not there. He'll come at 4 o'clock. You'll meet him. She takes care of every patient, every customer. And why I like the book? Because I had a Marathi poem which I read. It touched my heart. It touched my heart. In the Marathi poem says, we can understand Marathi, I'll tell you in Kokani also. Garat TV ala. Garat TV ala vi vachan visarlo. Garat TV आयलो हांव वाचपाचेंच विसरलो. घरात गाडी आली 4-wheeler. घरात गाडी आली मी चालणं विसरलो. Car came to my house. I forgot about walking. No exercise. हातात मोबाईल आला. मी पत्र लेखन विसरलो. Mobile came to my house. I forget about the writing. I got calculator. I forgot the math tables. The calculator can do everything for me in split of a second. AC came to my house. I forgot the cool wind that blows under a tree. That's the village life that Radha refers. I stayed in the cities. I reside in the city. मी शहरात राहिल्यामुळे मातीचा वास विसरलो. I forgot the beautiful smell of the sand, mud. While this book will give you the smell of the sand. Read this book. that mud of the smell, with the village mud smell that is required, that you grow up with in villages, that smell you can get after reading this book.
राधाबाब वॉज अ रायटर पण लेखक नाशिल्ले, कारण साहित्याच्या दृश्टीन पुस्तक पहिली प्रकाशित जावंक जाय, ग्रंथ जावंक जाय. राधाबाब एक कॉलमिस्ट, एक बऱ्यांतले बरे वकील, खडेगात वकील, जिबेक त्याचे कातर आणि मास्टर स्ट्रॅटेजिस्ट इन पॉलिटिक्स. खूब त्या फावटी म्हाका ताचे बरोबर डिबेट करपाची संदी मेळटा पॉलिटिक्स आणि इकॉनॉमिक्साच्या विशयाचेर, पण राधाबाबाक हात धरपी कोण ना. आणि जेन्ना राधाबाब सांगता की आपण पुस्तक बरयतलो आणि पुस्तक बरयलें म्हणून आमी फेसबुकार बी घाले, खूब जाणांनी म्हाका इतलेशे व्ह्यूज दिले, 2-3 व्ह्यूज सांगता. ताचे वयल्यान राधाबाबा बद्दल कितली म्हायती लोकांक आसा आणि कितली ना ही तुमकां कळटली. पयलीं मनशान सांगलें की राधाबाब पुस्तक बरयता 100% कॉम्युनल आसतलें. दुसऱ्यान म्हाका बरयलें राधाबाब बरें प्रो पोर्चुगीज, विवा पुर्तुगाल. तिसऱ्यान म्हणलें एकदम शुअर, एक पेपराचें नांव घेना पूण लोकमत म्हण तोंडार येता, आणि गोमंतक म्हणून दोगांयनी बरयलें. काँग्रेसाच्या लोकांक खंय भीती जाल्या, भंय जाला की काँग्रेसा बद्दल बरयतलो, एंटी काँग्रेस बरयतलो म्हणून राधाबाब. आणि चवथ्यान म्हणल्यार राधाबाब कितें बरो पॉलिटिकल एंगलाचेर बरयना आनी मजा येवपा ना मनोज बाब, कितें उलयतलो तूं. पण गेले 2 दीस हे पुस्तक हातांत धरलें. आय हॅड दिस बुक द लास्ट 2 इवनिंग्स and 2 wonderful evenings that you forget everything what you like in Goa and you understand why. This book in my hand, I forgot all those good things which otherwise I enjoy in the evenings. So this is a beautiful book which I have read in recent years. This book has a wonderful setting आणि पुस्तक वाचतकच जवळजवळ 34 चॅप्टर्स ताणें व्यवस्थित विस्तृत बरयला गोंयबद्दल. पण आज म्हाका सांगून दिसता जितले राधाबाबाचे क्रिटिक किंवा फ्रेंड म्हणा जे म्हाका व्हॉट्सॲप करपी आणि त्या परसेप्शन्स तुमकां सांगले हांवें लोकांचे, आज राधाबाबाक जर तुम्ही मुट्टो पिळटा, म्हणजे कॅश्यू एप्पल जर तुम्ही जर जसं पिळत आणि जर रोज काढत, तर वन थिंग इज ॲब्सोल्युटली शुअर, राधाबाबाच्या आंगांतल्यान, शिरांतल्यान, हाडांतल्यान गोंयकारपण पडटलें. त्या बद्दल तुका आणि त्याच गोंयकारपणाचो रोज म्हाका दिसता. राधाबाबा सुंदर बरयला, त्या गोंयकारपणाचो रोज ह्या पुस्तकांत सामको ओतप्रोत भरला, म्हणून म्हाका राधाबाबाचें कौतुक करून दिसता. Writing a novel is simple, but writing a novel with all those trajectories of something which is truly Goan is difficult. कारण कितले गोंयकार आमी बरोवपी पळयल्यात, आमी वाचता पॉलिटिकल एंगल, ताचे कम्युनल एंगल, सोशल एंगल, पूण एक गजाल सांगूंक सोदता, राधाबाबान पोर्तुगीजाचे प्रो काय बरयलें ना, राधाबाबान कम्युनल एंगल पुस्तकाक दिलें ना, पूण पॉलिटिकल एंगल दिसतलें म्हण म्हाका दिशिल्लें. एकूच चॅप्टर म्हाका पॉलिटिक्साचो दिसलो, विच इज फॅक्ट अँड फिक्शन ऑफ 1988-89, where राधाबाब हिमसेल्फ वॉज अ पार्टी टू इट, नोईंगली ऑर अननोईंगली. आता पुस्तकान कितलें खरें बरयलां, कितलें सत बरयलां, कितें पट बरयलां तें तुमकां पुस्तक वाचतकूच कळटलें. पण एकूच ताचो रेफरन्स म्हाका आवडलो, कारण राधाबाबाक खंय कातर लावपाची, खंय सूय टोकपाची आनी खंय खाचकुली करपाची सारकें कळटा. गिरीश बाब हसता. पेज नंबर 74 हांव गेलो, राधाबाबान अरे म्हणल्यार 74 पेजीस जाले, काँग्रेसाचें एकूय वाक्य ना, पूण एक सामकें बेस्ट, यू विल रियली लायक दॅट सेंटेन्स. राधाबाब म्हणटा आपूण माजोर्डा उतोर्डा गेलो आणि आय सॉ द स्वेइंग पाम्स. म्हणजे वाऱ्यान सामके माड सामके हालताले, दोलताले, ते माडांक पळोवन आपणाक दिसलें हे पळय काँग्रेसाच्या हायकमांडा फुडें काँग्रेस पॅन कशें तुलता तशें ते माड तुलता. हो एक रेफरन्स जरी सोडलो जाल्यार गिरीश बाब यू हॅव टू लाफ नाव. ब्युटिफूल स्टायल. म्हाका दिसता गोवन नॉवेलिस्ट जे आसात, इंग्लीश नॉवेलिस्ट, सांगा मावजो बाब बसल्यात, इंग्लीश नॉवेलिस्ट जे गोवन किंवा इंडियन गोवन नॉवेलिस्ट आहेत, इतले म्हाका दिसता एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन खंयच्याच लेखकान केलें, कारण आमी सगळे पुस्तकां सगळे तरेची सगळे जॉनराची वाचतात. एक सामको पॉप्युलर जॉनरा जो अल्केमिस्ट आयल्या नंतर पावलो कोयलोचो आमी पळयला, तो मिस्टिकल रियलिझम. चॅप्टर नंबर 1 सामकें मिस्टिकल रियलिझम फूट के बराबर. आणि मिस्टिकल रियलिझम राधाबाब जरी म्हणटा की when I was talking to him, he said I have experimented with magical realism, but more than magical realism, here I see mystical realism, because पदोपदी म्हणजे फुडल्या चॅप्टरान ताचे रिलिजन आणि थिओलॉजी परस, थिओलॉजी अँड रिलिजन आर स्टील व्हेरी व्हेरी मायराइट अँड व्हेरी व्हेरी वॉट इज ए कॉम्पॅक्ट वर्ड्स, पण ताच्या परस ह्युमॅनिटेरियन रिलिजन. the grounds of compassion. And Karan, in the first chapter himself, he quotes Luke. And one beautiful dialogue there. Luke chapter 10, he quotes one paragraph there, and there he says, when he quotes a story, when he says, Jesus says, go and help others. The compassion, that humility can be seen in Radhabag's writing. So it's a beautiful book, which number of twists. I don't want to break the climax of this particular book, because all 34 chapters have climax of its own. Chapter number 1 जर तुम्ही पाहिलं तर मिस्टिकल रिअलिझम तातूंत दिसता आणि त्या मिस्टिकल रिअलिझमाचेर आधाराचेर ताणें सबंद आपली कथा भितर गुंफल्या आणि कथा गुंफताना रिमेंबर गोंयची 50-60 वर्सां म्हणजे 1930-1940 पासून जी ताची स्टोरी खंय तरी स्टार्ट जाता ती 1988-89 पर्यंत ती काबार जाता आणि दॅट पर्टिक्युलर गोल्डन पिरियड ऑफ गोवा म्हणजे लिबरेटेड गोवा, Goa which has idea of secularism, Goa which has an idea of understanding your neighbors. And one thing I have seen, despite his good and bad examples, he believes in one thing: all Goans are good Goans. And I have hardly found a Goa which is a bad Goan. Now particular taso to moral to bukan asa, to kono kodi disa. So I must say a good Goan has written a good book about Goans, about the Goan ethos. कारण हे Goan ethos हम कित्याक म्हणटा कारण गोंयकारांक आवडीचे जे विषय आसा जो रापण जावं किलिंग अ वायल्ड बोर, जावं शूटिंग अ बर्ड and then enjoying that particular bird. Of course, it may be legal or illegal, whatsoever. But all those things which are intricate and which have been the part of Goan life, Goan weddings Goan ceremonies Ladin rapon or watermelon harvesting ache tache 2 chapters itla sundar झाल्या आणि that watermelon harvesting of कालाटा माजोर्डे आणि उतोर्ड्याचे वॉटरमेलन जाचेर इतले बरयला तुमकां रूच येतली काळी खावपाची न्हय पण नेक्स्ट टाइम व्हडले काळींक जर तुमी जर पळयत जाल्यार वेगळे वेगळे कल्पना तुमकां सुचतले इतले ट्विस्ट ताचे कथेंत आसात. मोर दॅन दॅट मॅरेजीस आणि कूड लायफ ती आमकां जी कूड हो जो कॉन्सेप्ट गोंयकारांनी जो रुजयला मुंबय आणि तातूंतल्यान जी पळयली आमी हॉनेस्टी, तातूंतल्यान कुडींतल्या लोकांचेर रावपी भुटले लोकांचे ते जेट आणि तातूंत जी हॉनेस्टी आमी गोंयकारांची पळयला. आज वी नॉर्मली टॉक अबाउट बॅड थिंग्स, वी नॉर्मली टेंड टू क्रिटिसाइज बिकॉज वी जनरली टेंड टू स्पीक विच इज नेगेटिव्ह. बट म्हाका दिसता फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम दिस राधाराव एज अ रायटर इज डिफरंट फ्रॉम राधाराव वॉट यू सी इन डिबेट्स. This Radha is different from what he writes in his columns because he has written everything which is good, everything which is melodious, everything which is harmony. And not only harmony among people, not only harmony in terms of relationship, but also harmony in terms of nature. I'm absolutely awed and struck, Radhabag, by looking at your knowledge of the rich flora and fauna of Goa. म्हाका दिसता बॉटनीच्या विशयाचेर गोंयची बॉटनी, गोंयचो फ्लोरा, गोंयचो फावनाचेर जर कोणेय जर सिरियस रिसर्च करता जर जायत जाल्यार 1940 ते 1990 पर्यंत just liberated Goa till modern Goa पर्यंत जो फ्लोरा आणि फाउनाचो उल्लेख हातूंत आयला, whether it is trees, whether it is shrubs, whether it is plants, whether it is insects, and whether it is birds of different variety coming from different parts of the world, ताचो उल्लेख आणि ताचे जे स्पष्टीकरण आणि ताचे जे सोबीतकाय जी बरयल्या म्हाका दिसता खंयच्याच रायटरान ते अशें नेरेट केल्लें ना. So when Radha tells me that this is a book of fiction, I will never believe that this is a book of fiction. Going by Radha's, at least those last chapters, 2-3 chapters, I will certainly not believe that those political stories written by Radharao cannot be fiction, because we know Radha as one of the key actors of those political conspiracies and political theories of 1800. आणि जो political conspirator आणि political actor, political strategist जर म्हणता आपली stories are fiction, I find it very difficult to believe. But the remaining part of the chapter, म्हाका दिसता goodness of Goan life, goodness of गोंयकार, goodness of Goa जर आज जर खंयच्या गव्हर्नमेंटाक जर depict करचे पडत in next 100 years, then this book will be an epitome of goodness of Goa, and that I'm absolutely sure. And I think this is a wonderful writer which we are seeing today. Today आम्ही फक्त राधा politics आणि strategy आणि debater म्हणता आणि lawyer म्हणता. Maybe Radha continues to write this. Radha will be known as an excellent writer of fiction, I ain't say non-fiction because I never call this as fiction. Maybe in the English literature, because ह्या बुकान जे ताणें डायव्हर्जन्स आणि एडव्हेंचर्स पळय, डायव्हर्जन्स आणि एडव्हेंचर्स बोथ व्हेरी युनिक. टिप्स अँड टर्न्स, क्लायमॅक्स अँड क्युरियोसिटी, आणि प्रत्येक गजाल कितली ओडप आणि कितली ताणप ती सारखी खबर आहा. कारण राजकारण हो ताचो खेळ. जसं तियात्र ताका आवडटा, जशें फेणी ताका आवडटा, तशें गोंयकारपण आवडटा, गोंयकार आवडटा, तशें ताका राजकारण आवडटा. आणि राजकारण आणि समाजकारण जे गोंयचें जे चित्रण राधाबाबान केलां म्हाका दिसता ताका तोड ना. बट मोर दॅन दॅट हे पुस्तक वाचून हांव खूब शिकलो गोंयच्या इतिहासा बद्दल. तिमोजा नायकान आल्बुकेर्क आफोन्साक हाडलो गोंयांत आमी जाणात, पूण तो रावलो खंय म्हाका खबर नाशिल्लें. एक डझन म्हणजे 12 हे म्हाका खबर आशिल्लें, पूण पोदेराचो डझन म्हणजे 13 हे म्हाका खबर नाशिल्लें. माजोर्डे उतोर्डे आनी कालाटाची हिस्ट्री आनी हिस्टोग्राम आनी ताची एथनोग्राफी म्हाका खबर नाशिल्ली. गोंयच्या बायोडायव्हर्सिटीन इतली डायव्हर्सिटी आसा हें हांव नकळो आशिल्लो जो पर्यंत हांवें तें पळोवना. जरी मडगांव, माजोर्डा, उतोर्डा, कालाटा, वेर्णा आनी नुय आनी वेर्णा हे जर ताचें जरी सेटिंग जर जालें म्हाका दिसता दिस बूक एवरीबडी रीड्स. इट टूक मी टू माय चायल्डहूड डेज. हांव तितलो जाणटो न्हय राधाबाबा अशें, पण जे म्हज्याकून चड वयाचे आसात दे वील ट्राय टू रिलेट टू एवरी एपिसोड, एवरी पर्सन. आनी राधाबाब सांगता की थोडे इन्सिडंट्सीस, थोडे जागे, थोडे स्टोरी लायन इतले यू वील रिलेट टू युअरसेल्फ बिकॉज यू नो दीस पर्टिक्युलर इन्सिडंट्स ऑफ गोवा. सो ऑफकोर्स राधाबाब नोज वेर टू पिंच, राधाबाब नोज वेर टू टिकल, and if you need to learn from him, if you want to learn from him, either you need to be his apprentice or either you need to read this book. I congratulate Radhabab. उलोवपाक खूब आसा, but Radhabab you are pressed for time, I know. But गोंयचो कल्चर, गोंयचे प्रॅक्टिसीस, ताचे बद्दल ताची तळमळ ती जिवंत उरची गोंयकारपण म्हूण ताचें तळमळ. नाजाल्यार गोंयकारपण हे राजकारणाचे भाग जाल्या, पूण गोंयकार आनी गोंयकारपण राधाबाब खऱ्या अर्थान जगलो. गोंय म्हणजे कितें तें राधाबाब समजलो, आनी गोंय म्हणजे कितें तें फुडल्या काळा खातीर जर समजोवपाक जाय म्हाका दिसता दिस बूक वील बी अ टेक्स्ट बूक फॉर एवरी गोवन who is essentially a Goikar and who considers it heart and soul in Goa. So I don't see this as an end. Radhabab, I'm looking at the end of the story. He writes about migration, immigration, and then he talks about person coming in search of his roots and then migrating in Ireland. I want to see our fellow Goikars who are now in Ireland, Tipperary, to see them back in Goa, Mazorda, Verna, and Kalata. So we are hoping for the second sequel. But remember, this book will catch you by its storm. And not only in Goa, कारण जितले लोक आज तुम्ही आसा तितलेच लोक see it is difficult to climb up the stairs. आणि तितलेच लोक भायर आसा तुज्या च्या कडेन आनी थंय काउंटर लायिल्लो थंय. आणि हो बुकचेर ह्या बुकाचेर रिलीज पोर्चुगल, कॅनडा ज्या ठिकाणी आमचे गोंयकार डायस्पोरा आसा, बूक वाचतकूच तांच्या दोळ्यांतल्यान दुखां येतली आणि थोड्या चॅप्टरान तांकां हांसोय तितलो निर्मळ मेळटलो हाची म्हाका पूर्ण सामकी जाणविकाय आसा. बिकॉज दिस बूक हॅज रियली लास्ट 24 आवर्स म्हणजे लास्ट 48 आवर्स हांवें वाचले, पूण गेल्या 24 वरां आय एम स्टील इन दॅट पर्टिक्युलर नॉस्टॅल्जिक आयडियाज आनी त्यो कल्पना म्हज्या तकलेन अजुनूय त्या बुकाची प्रकरणां दिसता. येताना म्हाका दिसतालें म्हाका वेळ जालो येवपाक काणकोणच्यान, नाजाल्यार मुद्दाम माजोर्ड्याच्यान मडगांव येत सारको. So all the best, Radhabab. We are looking for the second part, the sequel of this particular book.
First, that is the vote of thanks. I do not believe that the vote of thanks must be outsourced, because I think I should deliver the vote of thanks, and that is what I will do before I go into my address. Now, this book has been possible through various contexts, through various aspects. And the first person I have to thank is my wife, Mima. You see, what happens, this book has been written over a long period of time. Different parts were dictated by me to my wife, and they were typed over a considerable period of time. And she, without complaint, accepted my dictation. And I must say that I must be that rare husband here who can proudly tell you that I dictate to my wife. Not many husbands can say that. And I am saying it in her presence. But you must also note that this dictation is only as far as this novel is concerned. sometimes she's just like any other wife. Well, and you know, I have my Facebook page. If you go on the Facebook page, you'll see my columns there. And sometimes you see my wife's handiwork. When I'm writing nowadays, she is knitting. And she knits and puts her handiwork on my page. She doesn't have a page of her own. So, and I found that she is getting more likes than myself. So one day I got my friend to put up a comment on her knitting on the work, which said, "Your knitting is as bad as your writing." And after that she has stopped putting her work on my page. So now you see only my articles on my Facebook page, not my wife's. Now another person I have to thank, unfortunately she is not here with us now, is my elder daughter, Sukriti. She is actually into writing. She has taken writing as a career. She has got a master's in creative writing, but she could not be present today. She has also had a look at my book here and there and suggested something. My younger daughter Medini, she is not into writing, but she is the one I would always call upon whenever I have difficulties with the computer. I am not very computer savvy. So all these three people have made possible for this book to be there. Now besides this, and one particular person whom I missed today, unfortunately because he is gone to the USA, is my neighbor down the road, Xavier Kota. Now Xavier Kota is the one who actually, you see, I am not a writer as such, neither have I qualified in English literature, but he is the one who put my book in grammatical and other order. Everything, he systematically put my book in order. And after that, of course, Alexandre Muniz Barbosa, he is a seasoned editor and writer. I thank him for having edited my book. Then I cannot forget mentioning my friend. He's done a wonderful work, you'll see, Norman Tagore. You see, when I needed some illustrations and cover, I thought of two persons. One is another artist friend of mine from Penjim, Ted Mishkita, he's here. And the other one is Norman Tagore. But Norman is someone I could immediately get. I got to him and he readily agreed to make the cover and illustrations. And when I asked him about the fees, he said, "No, Doctor, I will not charge you. I will do it pro bono for you because I have never done illustrations for a book. I am really telling you, you look at the book and read the illustrations. I feel sometimes the illustrations are better than my writing. You will see that. Wonderful work he has done. My thanks to Norman Tagore. You are going to see a lot about this artist in the years ahead. Just if you invest in paintings, buy his painting, why not? You may appreciate any time. I have high regards for it. Now, then among the others, I have to thank are my office colleagues, 8, 10 of them. They are all here. Sapnil Desai, Bhaskar Thari, Rupesh Veli, and these two young men here, they have borne the brunt of my work. Mevlon Alphonse, Termin Aguiar, Jonathan Rodrigues, Princeton Alphonse, Shu Barbos, all these 9, 10 juniors, we all work in the same office. I have last few days, because of my work, they have had to sacrifice their own work and be around with me doing things. My sincere thanks to them. Then my friend from Betalbati, Anjona Cafe, who had provided the cakes. Then my friend Paresh Shah, you can't do without a Gujarati, my friend. He is the only Gujarati friend I have, long-standing friend, who has provided so many things to make this function what it is today. And above all, if there's one group of people I would like to thank, because this book I have written, taking into account the Goan Theatre. If there's one group of people I would like to thank, specifically, it is the Goan Theatrist. And I'll tell you why. See, the Goan Theatrist is a grossly underrated commodity. Somehow I do feel that the elite look down upon the theatre and the theatrist. They are not given much importance. I remember that in the 1960s during the opinion poll, if there was one group of people who took the message of non-major to the whole of Goa, it is the theatrists through their songs, through their skits. And in my book, I have used the technology perfected by the theatrist. You see, if you go to a theatre, there is a story, main story. And side by side there are songs, there are skits, and together both convey a message. I have done the same thing with my book. The main story is there, But in order to let the reader know what Goa is about, I have brought in things which may not necessarily be part of the story, but which enhance the story, and in the end, you'll see that there are two parallel stories. One is the main story, and the other one is you learn so much thing about Goa. And this I have picked up from my theatrist friends. And I must say, I don't know how many are here. I invited many of them. And most of them have good relations with me, and quite a few are here. Thomasin, he is more than a theatrist. He's a headmaster, educationist, and a wonderful theatrist. I suppose Francis Etienne will be here. Yeah. I met Prince Jacob. I met my friend Jaju. Quite a few I have met, I have seen. And these are the people I appreciate. I don't much go to theatre, no. Somehow I don't watch theatre, I don't watch films either. That has been my way of life. But I will tell you that if Konkani has survived, it is because of the theatrists. And the theatre writers are the only commodity in Goa who do original writing. Mine is just one book. My friend Angelo Rosefans has completed 100 theatres this year. Just imagine, they have come, but somehow Konkani theatre doesn't get recognition as literature. Then another friend, Edwin Da Costa, he has completed his 100th album of songs today. 100th album of songs. Just imagine that. So they compose songs, they write theatre, but they do not get the recognition that they deserve. Hopefully, someday I want to sit with them, maybe get some of the theatres translated, and I will talk with some publishers to publish the theatre. I am pretty sure that it will be very good literature. Now, having said that, let me now touch on my book. You see, I have been very fortunately very articulate from young. And that articulation has got me in trouble everywhere because I tend to speak my mind out. And most people don't like someone who speaks the mind out. But that has been the way I have been. Now, as you grow older, you realize that you can't go on speaking. You need to have an alternate means of communication. And that I started around 10 years back when Sujoy Gupta of the Herald requested me to write a column, and I started writing. And what I noticed after I started writing the column was one thing special. You see, generally whenever I am in a group, whenever I am in a wedding or somewhere, people converge around me and discuss politics, nothing but politics. Somehow it is in everybody's mind that Radharao Gracias is a political, some sort of a pandit. But after I started writing the column, gradually I found people would come and talk with me and discuss my column. They said how this happened, what happened, and this I realized that people are also read my column and they are concerned with it and they read it and they appreciate it. So later on I decided to go into a novel. And fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, COVID came around. So COVID kept me at home. I could not walk out, I could not go to court, I could not mix up with people. So I used that period largely to put in, to write my book. And as has been said by my previous speakers here, the purpose of my writing the book was very simple. I wanted to keep on record life in my teenage years, in the 60s and the 70s. Because I find that everything has changed now. Everything has changed. My children themselves don't believe when I tell them how we live. They find it difficult. They think I am telling them fiction. But in this book, you'll find two things. One is the narration, which is largely fiction. And the other is the descriptive part. I have consciously set the novel in my own neighborhood, where I grew up, in the village of Betalbaki, Majorda and Nuin, largely in Goa. And I have again deliberately described every scene the way I can recollect. I have not added or changed anything. Everything I remember, I have placed my heroes, my heroines, everybody in that context, so that I paint a picture of rural Goa as it was. So when you read the book, I am pretty sure most of you particularly from Salsit, will identify with what I have written, because that is the way we lived. And I want everybody, maybe a few years from now, if they want something about how Goans live, if you read my book, you will know. The characters may be fictitious, but the description is correct. Now another thing that I have noticed is that now the typical Goan names in which I grew up, Pedro, Santan, Kaitan, Rock, Ruza, Juan, all these names are disappeared. In fact, earlier, all these names, these were the common names in Goa. Today I find Kennedy, Churchill, Reagan, all these names coming. Everybody's got high-sounding names. And different type of names. Our own names are identities. So I have taken to see pains to see that every name that is mentioned is a real Goan name. In fact, I must also say that my father started this process. Until we came along, my generation, all our names were repeated. The father started Jayanti, Prakash, Radharao, and I have to continue it for my children. So maybe this change is there, but at the same time, it is important that we preserve our names. Every time you get an invitation for a baptism, you always find some strange names not connected with Goa. Goa names are changing, people are changing. So if you read the book, keep the book, you'll find real Goa names there. Now, and for all this, I have to thank my father. You see, when we were growing up, the only thing at home, I was fortunate, very fortunate, that we had a house where we had a big library and a lot of books. And my father would always come home with all sorts of periodicals. There was the Mirror, Illustrated Weekly, Bharat Jyoti, Sunday Standard, all types of magazines he would bring home and practically force us when we were the batch. And we would read. Gradually, my father died, but the reading habit that was done caught on. And I am definitely the product of what I have read. You see, what happens is, what you read, a small thing remains. Most of it disappears as you go, but even that small thing, if you have read a lot, means a lot. And whenever people today compliment me for my knowledge, I always think of my father, because it was he who pushed us into excellence, pushed us into reading, and through my reading comes my knowledge. Now, as Vinay was saying, there was teacher Ninette. In fact, I was trying to contact her on the phone, I couldn't, but I had told her son, and she's here. See, in the book you'll find Ninette joined my school when I was in 11. That was my final year, SSC. That time it was 11. She was very young. She was short. She was fair. And her dress was even shorter. That's what I have mentioned. That's what I have mentioned. Now, of course, now she is here. She is here. She is now older. And obviously, when you are older, you don't have much legs to display. So your dress has become longer. And I also said there that she had a perennial smile on her face. She's somewhere here. You look at her, I'm pretty sure she's smiling now. She's one teacher I knew always had a smile on her face. And as it happens, later she shifted schools, went to Fatima Convent, and there she became my daughter's teacher also. Also my nieces, Miss Manisha and all, they all studied under her. She's one teacher with a permanent smile on her face. And I do hope when she reads this book, she'll get even a bigger smile. Now, what happens is, in the book, I have described the Goan professions, occupations, and incorporated them into my novel. And I think I am one very fortunate in having had the advantage all these 40 years of as a lawyer. I have also been an activist. And many of my clients have been the poorer people. Wherever there was some trouble, one group had to end up at my office. The fishermen, the tribals, the toddy tappers, all these 40 years I must have represented the entire gambit of the Goan underclass. And that has given me the advantage. I am pretty at home sitting with the tribal of Nubia or Verna, or the fishermen in Majorda or Betalpati or anywhere on the coastal area, or the toddy tapper or anyone, or the carpenters, having sat with them, checked how they work, and seen their lifestyle. And all that is reflected in my book. Everything is from my personal knowledge. Of course, I have now sought to sort of revive it. I have met people who got clarifications. But essentially, all my personal experiences with my clients, with people, as an activist, that is all there in the book, in the form of fiction. Now, all said and done, this is my first novel, but definitely not my first book. Hopefully, I hope to publish my essays, maybe in the next year or so. And after that, there's something I want to do more. I have it in my mind to write a book of short stories. Now, this particular book is centered in my own village, but these stories I want to do in different villages of Goa. My purpose is to pick up the ambience of some of the villages and get that flavor in my book. So hopefully I have selected villages like Divar, Saligaon, Aldona, Sant Esteban, and then villages in the Novas Conquistas like Sirigaon, and all those different villages. Anyway, whole problem is I'll have to spend time there. I'm not someone who would simply want to write a book based on unverified facts. So I hope to travel to some of these villages, spend some time there, pick up the substance of these villages, and then place a short story there. Again, the purpose is to convey or to maintain a record of life in Goa in different parts at that point of time. And most of my stories, hopefully, would be in the earlier years. Because today, all this is commercialized now. There's nothing to be reported. People have got pictures, telephone, everything is there. I want to do it again in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And for that, I need a cooperation of my goons. I would be contacting some people. If you have something important incident, something, any village to narrate, I'd be happy to listen to you and then convert it into a story and also attribute it to you. I have no problem in attributing a story to whoever is the source. Because it is important that what is happening in our villages happening has to be recorded and maintained so that people know. And because our life, this present lifestyle is changing. In maybe 25 years will be a different world altogether, both in terms of our living standard, and I don't think even in 25 years, even 30% of people living in Goa would be what we call these Goenka. They may not be Goans, but I think that is the way the world changes. We can't help it, but we have at least to maintain our record, and I'm sure many others would do it. And before I conclude, only one request to you. To see for a writer, what matters is now what today. So many of you have come, it makes me happy. It makes me feel that yes, if I take out time out to write, there are people who will come, who will read it. If people don't read, people don't buy my books, no one is going to write a book. So it is important that you buy books, particularly those written by Goan writers. Please, I am not saying only my book. There are here writers, all of us here sitting here, Dr. Kamar, Munish, Jason, Sarah, all of them have written books. It is important you buy books. And only one suggestion again. See, when you go for a wedding, Catholic wedding, you find that there is something called a takeaway. On each table, some trinket is kept, which people take away. For me, those trinkets are useless little things, are dumped when you take home. No one knows what it is. I would suggest that if there is any wedding in your family, a daughter or son, please keep a book as a takeaway. And put your, whatever this is there, your names of your bride and the groom. I am pretty sure that would be a much, much better way, because whoever takes the book will keep it, that will not be thrown away. It will be maintained, it will be read, and they will always remember the name on the page who has given it. And I am not saying you take only my book, no, any book, but a book written by Goan, because we have to help our own people. And I will tell you one more thing. If you want books, you have to contact the publisher, like say our Broadway. If you want books in bulk, say 100 books for a wedding, he will give a huge discount, something like 40% discount you will get. So there is no need, it would cost you the same thing as the trinket which you will use for the wedding. So my suggestion is please keep a book, it would be very nice. Whoever takes the book home will read it, and it will also help the writer to make sales. And also when you present someone, you could present a book. That would also help the buyer, the fellow who gets the book, to know about our society, about our life. So having said that, I wouldn't want to take more of your time. I think it's time for Dr. Jason Kit Fernandez. Only on him I'd like to add something which has not been said earlier. I met Jason many years ago, and I have been impressed by his knowledge and by his commitment to Goa. You see him now in the dress of a priest, or virtual priest. You see, some 4 or 5 years back, I have been in touch with him. He calls me and tells me he's joining the papal seminary in Rome, which to me was a surprise, because he is someone who is qualified so very well, and who I think is brilliant academically and has a brilliant mind, that he would, in my thinking, waste his life on priesthood. And because generally today we think going to priesthood is a waste. But I am happy he's gone in there, because we need priests who can think, we need priests who can see clearly and who can identify and make a difference. And above all, he's coming to Goa. See, normally we go on, the bright fellows go out and settle abroad. He's come back to Goa. He will be ordained in 2 years' time, and he will be a priest here. You should be prepared to listen to his sermons. And I somehow get the feeling at the back of my mind that someday, somewhere, if it comes to, it is going to come sooner or later, Asian head of the Roman Catholic Church, Jason may be there.
I have to confess that I agreed to release the book without having read it. But then how could I refuse Dr. Radharao? And having been witness to his provocations in social media over the years, and thanks to our conversations, I knew that subsequent to accepting, I would not be placed in an awkward position. And to be honest, the author has exceeded all expectations. For this, my congratulations, Dr. When he invited me, Dr. Radharao indicated that his intention had been to present a record of the Goa of his youth, a Goa that is fast disappearing, or indeed has already disappeared. This is not an uncommon desire among Goans of a certain age. And yet oftentimes the result is disastrous. Right? The narrative labors under the weight of an activist frenzied desire, and one has to deal with the tedious explanations of the minutiae of local life that the activist author wishes to capture, down to the most boring detail. And then there is the question of the language placed in the mouths of these characters. Either it seeks to mimic the native tongue of these characters, and we have the results in this hideous pidgin, or it is a form of English that is so removed as to be unrealistic. I think Savia has already commented on this. In fact, most of what I have to say this evening has already been covered by my co-panelists. I'm happy to report that a shortcut to Tipperary suffers from neither of these shortcomings. Dr. Radharao says all that he has to say, and he has much to say, but with a hand that is as light as a meringue. I remember some years and years ago, in 2000, I began writing in 2006 in the newspapers. And Professor Ali Sikaira, the late Professor Ali Sikaira, he said, your words should be like a butterfly's wings, but it should fall like a hammer. I have not been able to succeed on that front. But I think the Dr. Radharao has definitely succeeded, and I need to spend some time taking lessons from you. I wish I had such skill. Indeed, as a friend and I were discussing the other day, at times teaching is best done indirectly, through parables. On this score, the Dr. has done very well indeed. But what exactly is our Dr. preaching? In a nutshell, I believe he is, like many of us, concerned with the question of Goan difference. In his telling, and I'm in agreement with him, the difference is Catholicism. What makes Goan to Advogado Radharao Gracias is the Goan Catholic. Without us, he argues to the figure of Alberto, Goa will never be Goa. Catholicism, and to some extent language, and on this latter point I disagree with him partially, but I will return to this point later. Catholicism and to some extent language are what make Goa. What makes, or to be honest, what made the Goan different, honest, hospitable, is Catholicism. This is the ingredient of our formerly earthy paradise. Our author recognizes that not all Goans fulfill this norm. Indeed, a shortcut contains a wonderful example of a dastardly Goan Catholic. But as the narrator points out, there are always a few bad apples. Nevertheless, bad apples notwithstanding, the norm still holds, or held, because these days you can count the good Catholics on your fingers and the bad Catholics are plenty. Nonetheless, bad apples notwithstanding, the norm still holds or held, And these features of the Goan resulted from Catholicism. Now, those who were hoping for communalism from the Dr. might turn around and say, there you go. He's called this chief guest to do the communal work for him. What I'm saying is that Catholicism is like salt in Goa. Yeah, without salt there is no flavor. And this salt gives flavor to everything that is inside the vessel.